The Mahabharata of KRISHNA-DWAIPAYANA VYASA. Book 1. PARVA. Section 134. Sambhava PARVA. VYASA said, thus worshipped by VYASA, Drona, that first of men, endued with great energy, took up his quarters in the abode of the Krus and continued to live there, receiving their adorations. After he had rested a while, VYASA, taking with him his grandsons, the Kaurava princes, gave them unto him as pupils, making at the same time many valuable presents. And the mighty one, VYASA, also joyfully gave unto the son of VYASA a house that was tidy and neat and well filled with paddy and every kind of wealth. And that first of archers, Drona, thereupon joyfully accepted the Kauravas, namely, the sons Pandu and Dhritarashtra, as his pupils. And having accepted them all as his pupils, one day Drona called them apart and making them touch his feet, said to them with a swelling heart, I have in my heart a particular purpose. Promise me truly, ye sinless ones, that when ye have become skilled in arms, ye will accomplish it. VYASA continued, hearing these words, the Kuru princes remained silent. But Arjuna, O king, vowed to accomplish it whatever it was. Drona then cheerfully clasped Arjuna to his bosom and took the scent of his head repeatedly, shedding tears of joy all the while. Then Drona, endued with great prowess, taught the sons Pandu the use of many weapons both celestial and human. And, O bull of the Bharata race, many other princes also flocked to that best of Brahmanas for instruction in arms. The Vrishnis and the Andakas, and princes from various lands, and the adopted son of Radha of the Studa caste, Karna, all became pupils of Drona. But of them all, the Studa child Karna, from jealousy, frequently defied Arjuna, and supported by Dridana, used to disregard the Pandavas. Arjuna, however, from devotion to the science of arms, always stayed by the side of his preceptor, and in skill, strength of arms, and perseverance, excelled all his class fellows. Indeed, although the instruction the preceptor gave was the same in the case of all, yet in likeness and skill Arjuna became the foremost of all his fellow pupils. And Drona was convinced that none of his pupils would, at any time, be able to be equal to that son of Indra. Thus Drona continued giving lessons to the princes in the science of weapons. And while he gave unto every one of his pupils a narrow-mouthed vessel, for fetching water, in order that much time may be spent in filling them, he gave unto his own son Aswatthama a broad-mouthed vessel, so that, filling it quickly, he might return soon enough. And in the interval so gained, Drona used to instruct his own son in several superior methods of using weapons. Arjuna came to know of this, and thereupon filling his narrow-mouthed vessel with water by means of the Varuna weapon he used to come unto his preceptor at the same time with his preceptor's son. And accordingly the intelligent son of Pritha, that foremost of all men possessing a knowledge of weapons, had no inferiority to his preceptor's son in respect of excellence. Arjuna's devotion to the service of his preceptor as also to arms was very great, and he soon became the favorite of his preceptor. And Drona, beholding his pupil's devotion to arms, summoned the cook, and told him in secret, never give Arjuna his food in the dark, nor tell him that I have told thee this. A few days after, however, when Arjuna was taking his food, a wind arose, and thereupon the lamp that had been burning went out. But Arjuna, endued with energy, continued eating in the dark, his hand, from habit, going to his mouth. His attention being thus called to the force of habit, the strong-armed son of Pandu set his heart upon practicing with his bow in the night. And Odbharata, Drona, hearing the twang of his bestring in the night, came to him, and clasping him, said, Truly do I tell thee that I shall do that unto thee by which there shall not be an archer equal to thee in this world. Vyampayana continued. Thereafter Drona began to teach Arjuna the art of fighting on horseback, on the back of elephants, on car, and on the ground. And the mighty Drona also instructed Arjuna in fighting with the mace, the sword, the lance, the spear, and the dart. And he also instructed him in using many weapons and fighting with many men at the same time. And hearing reports of his skill, kings and princes, desirous of learning the science of arms, flocked to Drona by thousands. Amongst those that came there, O monarch, was a prince named Eklavya, who was the son of Hiranyadanas, king of the Nishadas, the lowest of the mixed orders. Drona, however, cognizant of our rules of morality, accepted not the prince as his pupil in archery, seeing that he was a Nishada who might, in time, excel all his high-born pupils. But, O oppressor of all enemies, the Nishada prince, touching Drona's feet with bent head, went his way into the forest, and there he made a clay image of Drona, and began to worship it respectfully, as if it was his real preceptor, and practiced weapons before it with the most rigid regularity. In consequence of his exceptional reverence for his preceptor and his devotion to his purpose, all the three processes of fixing arrows on the bestring, aiming, and letting off became very easy for him. And one day, O grinder of foes, the crew and the Pandava princes, with Drona's leave, set out in their cars on a hunting excursion. A servant, O king, followed the party at leisure, with the usual implements and a dog. Having come to the woods, they wandered about, intent on the purpose they had in view. Meanwhile, the dog also, in wandering alone in the woods, came upon the Nishada prince, Eklavya. And beholding the Nishada of dark hue, a body smeared with filth, dressed in black and bearing metlocks on head, the dog began to bark aloud. Thereupon the Nishada prince, desirous of exhibiting his lightness of hand, sent 7 arrows into its mouth, before it could shut it. The dog, thus pierced with 7 arrows, came back to the Pandavas. Those heroes, who beheld that sight, were filled with wonder, and, ashamed of their own skill, began to praise the lightness of hand and precision of aim by a clear precision, exhibited by the unknown archer. And they thereupon began to seek in those woods for the unknown dweller therein that had shown such skill. And, O king, the Pandavas soon found out the object of their search, ceaselessly discharging arrows from the bow. And beholding that man of grim visage, who was totally a stranger to them, they asked, Who art thou and whose son? Thus questioned, the man replied, Ye heroes, I am the son of Hiranyadanas, king of the Nishadas. Know me also for a pupil of Drona, laboring for the mastery of the art of arms. Vyampayana continued. The Pandavas then, having made themselves acquainted with everything connected with him, returned to the city, and going unto Drona, told him of that wonderful feat of archery which they had witnessed in the woods. Arjuna, in particular, thinking all the while, O king, Eklavya, saw Drona in private and relying upon his preceptor's affection for him, said, Thou hadst lovingly told me, clasping me to thy bosom, that no pupil of thine should be equal to me. Why then is there a pupil of thine, the mighty son of the Nishada king, superior to me? Vyampayana continued. On hearing these words, Drona reflected for a moment, and resolving upon the course of action he should follow, took Arjuna with him and went unto the Nishada prince. And he beheld Eklavya with body smeared with filth, metlocks on head, clad in rags, bearing a bow in hand and ceaselessly shooting arrows therefrom. And when Eklavya saw Drona approaching towards him, he went a few steps forward, and touched his feet and prostrated himself on the ground. And the son of the Nishada king, worshipping Drona, duly represented himself as his pupil, and clasping his hands in reverence stood before him, awaiting his commands. Then Drona, O king, addressed Akildya, saying, "If, O hero, thou art really my pupil, give me then my fees." On hearing these words, Akildya was very much gratified, and said in reply, "O illustrious preceptor, what shall I give? Command me. For there is nothing, O foremost of all persons conversing with the Vedas, that I may not give unto my preceptor." Drona answered, "O Akildya, if thou art really intent on making me a gift, I should like then to have the thumb of thy right hand." Vyyampayana continued, hearing these cruel words of Drona, who had asked of him his thumb as tuition fee, Akildya, ever devoted to truth and desirous also of keeping his promise, with a cheerful face and an unafflicted heart, cut off without ado his thumb, and gave it unto Drona. After this, when the Nishada prince began once more to shoot with the help of his remaining fingers, he found, O king, that he had lost his former lightness of hand. And at this Arjuna became happy, the fever of jealousy having left him. Two of Drona's pupils became very much accomplished in the use of mace. These were Duryodhana and Bhima, who were, however, always jealous of each other. Aswatthama excelled everyone in the mysteries of the science of arms. The twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, excelled everybody in handling the sword. Yudhishthira surpassed everybody as a car warrior, but Arjuna, however, outdistanced everyone in every respect, in intelligence, resourcefulness, strength and perseverance. Accomplished in all weapons, Arjuna became the foremost of even the foremost of car warriors, and his fame spread all over the earth to the verge of the sea. And although the instruction was the same, the mighty Arjuna excelled all the princes in lightness of hand. Indeed, in weapons as in devotion to his preceptor, he became the foremost of them all. And amongst all the princes, Arjuna alone became an Adaratha, a car warrior capable of fighting at one time with 60,000 foes. And the wicked sons have Dhritarashtra, beholding Bhima endued with great strength and Arjuna accomplished in all arms, became very jealous of them. O bull among men, one day Drona, desirous of testing the comparative excellence of all his pupils in the use of arms, collected them all together after their education had been completed. And before assembling them together, he had caused an artificial bird, as the would-be aim, to be placed on the top of a neighboring tree. And when they were all together, Drona said unto them, "Take up your bows quickly and stand here aiming at that bird on the tree, with arrows fixed on your bowstrings. Shoot and cut off the bird's head, as soon as I give the order. I shall give each of you a turn, one by one, my children." Vyyampayana continued, then Drona, that foremost of all Angiras' sons, first addressed Yudhishthira saying, "O irrepressible one, aim with thy arrow and shoot as soon as I give the order." Yudhishthira took up the bow first, as desired, O king, by his preceptor, and stood aiming at the bird. But, O bull of Bharata's race, Drona in an instant, addressing the cruel prince standing with bow in hand, said, "Behold, O prince, the bird on top of the tree." Yudhishthira replied unto his preceptor, saying, "I do." But the next instant Drona again asked him, "What dost thou see now, O prince?" "Seest thou the tree, myself or thy brothers?" Yudhishthira answered, "I see the tree, myself, my brothers, and the bird." Drona repeated his question, but was answered as often in the same words. Drona then, vexed with Yudhishthira, reproachingly said, "Stand apart. It is not for thee to strike the aim." Then Drona repeated the experiment with Duryodhana and the other sons have Dhritarashtra, one after another, as also with his other pupils, Bhima and the rest, including the princes that had come unto him from other lands. But the answer in every case was the same as Yudhishthira's, namely, "We behold the tree, thyself, our fellow pupils, and the bird." And reproached by their preceptor, they were all ordered, one after another, to stand apart. Section 135. Vyampayana said, when everyone had failed, Drona smilingly called Arjuna and said unto him, by thee the aim must be shot. Therefore, turn thy eyes to it. Thou must let fly the arrow as soon as I give the order. Therefore, O son, stand here with bow and arrow for an instant. Thus addressed, Arjuna stood aiming at the bird as desired by his preceptor, with his bow bent. An instant after Drona asked him as in the case of others, seest thou, O Arjuna, the bird there, the tree, and myself? Arjuna replied, I see the bird only, but nor the tree, or thyself. Then the irrepressible Drona, well pleased with Arjuna, the instant after, again said unto that mighty car warrior amongst the Pandavas, if thou seest the vulture, then describe it to me. Arjuna said, I see only the head of the vulture, not its body. At these words of Arjuna, the hair on Drona's body stood on end from delight. He then said to Partha, shoot. And the latter instantly let fly his arrow, and with his sharp shaft speedily struck off the head of the vulture on the tree and brought it down to the ground. No sooner was the deed done, Drona clasped Phalguna to his bosom and thought Drupada with his friends had already been vanquished in fight. Some time after, O bull of VYASA race, Drona, accompanied by all his pupils, went to the bank of the Ganga to bathe in that sacred stream. And when Drona had plunged into the stream, a strong alligator, sent as it were by death himself, seized him by the thigh. And though himself quite capable, Drona in a seeming hurry asked his pupil to rescue him. And they said, oh, kill this monster and rescue me. Contemporaneously with this speech, Vibhatsu, Arjuna, struck the monster within the water with 5 sharp arrows irresistible in their course, while the other pupils stood confounded, each at his place. Beholding Arjuna's readiness, Drona considered him to be the foremost of all his pupils, and became highly pleased. The monster, in the meantime cut into pieces by the arrows of Arjuna, released the thigh of illustrious Drona and gave up the ghost. The son of Bharadwaja then addressed the illustrious and mighty car warrior Arjuna and said, accept, O thou of mighty arms, this very superior and irresistible weapon called Brahmastra with the methods of hurling and recoiling it. Thou must not, however, ever use it against any human foe, for if hurled at any foe endued with inferior energy, it might burn the whole universe. It is said, O child, that this weapon hath not appeared in the 3 worlds. Keep it, therefore, with great care, and listen to what I say. If ever, O hero, any foe, not human, contended against thee, thou mayst then employ it against him for compassing his death in battle. Pledging himself to do what he was bid, Vibhatsu then, with joint hands, received that great weapon. The preceptor then, addressing him again, said, none else in this world will ever become a superior bowman to thee. Vanquished thou shalt never be by any foe, and thy achievements will be great. Section 136. Vyampayana said, O thou of Bharadwaja race, beholding the sons have Dhritarashtra and Pandu accomplished in arms, Drona, O monarch, addressed King Dhritarashtra in the presence of Kripa, Sambhava, Valmika, the wise son of Ganga, Bhishma, VYASA, and Vidura, and said, O best of Kuru kings, thy children have completed their education. With thy permission, O king, let them now show their proficiency. Hearing him, the king said with a gladdened heart, O best of Brahmanas, thou hast, indeed, accomplished a great deed. Command me thyself as to the place and the time wherein and the manner also in which the trial may be held. Grief arising from my own blindness maketh me envy those who, blessed with sight, will behold my children's prowess in arm. O Kshatri, Vidura, do all thou Drona saith. O thou devoted to virtue, I think there is nothing that can be more agreeable to me." Then Vidura, giving the necessary assurance to the king, went out to do what he was bid. And Drona entered with great wisdom, then measured out a piece of land that was void of trees and thickets and furnished with wells and springs. And upon the spot of land so measured out, Drona, that first of eloquent men, selecting a lunar day when the star ascendant was auspicious, offered up sacrifice unto the gods in the presence of the citizens assembled by proclamation to witness the same. And then, bold among men, the artificers of the king built therein a large and elegant stage according to the rules laid down in the scriptures, and it was furnished with all kinds of weapons. They also built another elegant hall for the laity spectators. And the citizens constructed many platforms while the wealthier of them pitched many spacious and high tents all around. When the day fixed for the tournament came, the king accompanied by his ministers, with Bhishma and Kripa, the foremost of preceptors, walking ahead, came unto the theatre of almost celestial beauty constructed of pure gold, and decked with strings of pearls and stones of lapis lazuli. And, O first of victorious men, Gandhari blessed with great good fortune and Kunti, and the other ladies of the royal household, in gorgeous attire and accompanied by their waiting women, joyfully ascended the platforms, like celestial ladies ascending the Smara mountain. And the four orders including the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, desirous of beholding the princess' skill in arms, left the city and came running to the spot. And so impatient was everyone to behold the spectacle, that the vast crowd assembled there in almost an instant. And with the sounds of trumpets and drums and the noise of many voices, that vast concourse appeared like an agitated ocean. At last, Drona accompanied by his son, dressed in white attire, with a white sacred thread, white locks, white beard, white garlands, and white sandal paste rubbed over his body, entered the lists. It seemed as if the moon himself, accompanied by the planet Mars, appeared in an unclouded sky. On entering Bharatwaja, performed timely worship and as Brahmanas versed in mantras to celebrate the auspicious rites. And after auspicious and sweet-sounding musical instruments had been struck up as a propitiatory ceremony, some persons entered, equipped with various arms. And then having girded up their loins, those mighty warriors, those foremost ones have Bharatas race, the princes, entered, furnished with finger protectors, gauntlet, and bows, and quivers. And with Yudhishthira at their head, the valiant princes entered in order of age and began to show wonderful skill with their weapons. Some of the spectators lowered their heads, apprehending fall of arrows, while others fearlessly gazed on with wonder. And riding swiftly on horses and managing them dexterously, the princes began to hit marks with shafts engraved with their respective names. And seeing the prowess of the princes armed with bows and arrows, the spectators thought that they were beholding the city of the Gandharvas, became filled with amazement. And, Bharata, all on a sudden, some hundreds and thousands, with eyes wide open in wonder, exclaimed, "Well done! Well done!" And having repeatedly displayed their skill and dexterity in the use of bows and arrows and in the management of cars, the mighty warriors took up their swords and bucklers, and began to range the lists, playing their weapons. The spectators saw, with wonder, their agility, the symmetry of their bodies, their grace, their calmness, the firmness of their grasp and their deftness in the use of sword and buckler. Then Vrukadara and Saidana, internally delighted at the prospect of fight, entered the arena, mace in hand, like two single-peaked mountains. And those mighty armed warriors braced their loins, and summoning all their energy, roared like two infuriate elephants contending for a cow-elephant. And like two infuriated elephants those mighty heroes faultlessly, in consonance with the dictates of the science of arm, carry right and left, circling the lists. And victory described to Dhritarashtra and the mother of the Pandavas, Kunti, and Ganguli, all the feats of the princes. Section 137. Vayampayana continued, upon the Kuru king and Bhima, the foremost of all endued with strength, having entered the arena, the spectators were divided into two parties in consequence of that partiality swaying their affections. Some cried, "Behold the heroic king of the Kurus!" Some, "Behold Bhima!" And on account of these cries, there was, all on a sudden, a loud uproar. And seeing the place become like a troubled ocean, the intelligent Bharatadwaja said unto his dear son, Aswaghaman, restrain both these mighty warriors so proficient in arms. Let not the ire of the assembly be provoked by this combat of Bhima and Dridana. Vayampayana continued, then the son of the preceptor of the princes restrained those combatants with their messes uplifted and resembling two swollen oceans agitated by the winds that blow of the universal dissolution. And Drona himself, entering the yard of the arena, commanded the musicians to stop, and with a voice deep as that of the clouds addressed these words, Behold ye now that Partha who is dearer to me than my own son, the master of all arms, the son of Indra himself, and like unto the younger brother of Indra, Vishnu. And having performed the propitiatory rites, the youthful Falguna, equipped with the finger protector, gauntlet, and his quiver full of shafts and bow in hand, donning his golden mail, appeared in the lists even like an evening cloud reflecting the rays of the setting sun and illumined by the hues of the rainbow and flashes of lightning. On seeing Arjuna, the whole assembly were delighted and conchs began to be blown all around with other musical instruments. And there arose a great uproar in consequence of the spectators exclaiming, This is the graceful son of Kunti. This is the middle, third, Pandava. This is the son of the mighty Indra. This is the protector of the Kurus. This is the foremost of those versed in arms. This is the foremost of all cherishers of virtue. This is the foremost of the persons have correct behavior, the great repository of the knowledge of manners. At those exclamations, the tears of Kunti, mixing with the milk of her breast, wetted her bosom. And his ears being filled with that uproar, that first of men, Dhritarashtra, asked Vidura in delight, O Kshatri, what is this great uproar for, like unto that of the troubled ocean, arising all on a sudden and rending the very heavens? Victory replied, O mighty monarch, the son of Pandu and Pritha, Falguna, clad in mail hath entered the lists. And hence this uproar. Dhritarashtra said, O thou of soul so great, by the three fires sprung from Pritha who is even like the sacred fuel, I have, indeed, been blessed, favored and protected. Vayampayana continued, when the spectators, excited with delight, had somewhat regained their equanimity, Vipasa began to display his lightness in the use of weapons. By the Agnya weapon, he created fire, and by the Varuna weapon he created water, by the Vavyar weapon, he created air, and by the Parjanya weapon he created clouds. And by the Bhuma weapon, he created land, and by the Parva weapon, he brought mountains into being. By the Antarctic weapon all these were made to disappear. Now the beloved one of his preceptor, Arjuna, appeared tall and now short. Now he was seen on the yoke of his car, and now on the car itself, and the next moment he was on the ground. And the hero favored by his practiced dexterity, hit with his various bouts, some tender, some fine and some of thick composition. And like one shaft, he let fly at a time into the mouth of a moving iron board 5 shafts together from his bowstring. And that hero of mighty energy discharged 21 arrows into the hollow of a cow's horn hung up on the road swaying to and fro. In this manner, O sinless one, Arjuna showed his profound skill in the use of sword, bow, and mace, walking over the lists in circles. And, ODHARATA, when the exhibition had well nigh ended, the excitement of the spectators had cooled, and the sounds of instruments had died out. There was heard proceeding from the gate, the slapping of arms, betokening might and strength, and even like unto the roar of the thunder. And, O king, as soon as this sound was heard, the assembled multitudes instantly thought, are the mountains splitting, or is the earth itself rending asunder, or is the welkin resounding with the roar of gathering clouds? And then all the spectators turned their eyes towards the gate. And Drona stood, surrounded by the 5 brothers, the sons of Pritha, and looked like the moon in conjunction with the 5-starred constellation Hasta. And Dridana, that slayer of foes, stood up in haste and was surrounded by his century of haughty brothers with a Swataman amongst them. And thou prince, mace in hand, thus surrounded by his 100 brothers with uplifted weapons, appeared like Purna in days of yore, encircled by the celestial host on the occasion of the battle with the Damavas. Section 138. VYASA continued, when the spectators, with eyes expanded with wonder, made way for the subjugator of hostile cities, Karna, that hero with his natural mail and face brightened with earrings, took up his bow and girded on his sword, and then entered the spacious lists, like a walking cliff. That far-famed destroyer of hostile hosts, the large-eyed Karna, was born of Pritha in her maidenhood. He was a portion of the hot beam's sun, and his energy and prowess were like unto those of the lion, or the bull, or the leader of a herd of elephants. In splendor he resembled the sun, in loveliness the moon, and in energy the fire. Begotten by the sun himself, he was tall in stature like a golden palm tree, and, endued with the vigor of youth, he was capable of slaying a lion. Handsome in features, he was possessed of countless accomplishments. The mighty armed warrior, eyeing all around the arena, bowed indifferently to Drona and Kripa. And the entire assembly, motionless and with steadfast gaze, thought, who is he? And they became agitated in their curiosity to know the warrior. And thou foremost of eloquent men, the offspring of the sun, in a voice deep as that of the clouds, addressed his unknown brother, the son of the subduer of the Ajara, Pekka, Indra, saying, O Partha, I shall perform feats before this gazing multitude, excelling all thou hast performed. Beholding them, thou shalt be amazed. And, O thou best of those blessed with speech, he had hardly done when the spectators stood up all at once, uplifted by some instrument, as it were. And, O tiger among men, Dridana was filled with delight, while VYASA was instantly all bashment and anger. Then with the permission of Drona, the mighty Karna, delighting in battle, there did all that Partha had done before. And, ODHARATA, Dridana with his brothers thereupon embraced Karna in joy, and then addressed him saying, Welcome, O mighty armed warrior. I have obtained thee by good fortune, O polite one. Live thou as thou pleasest, and command me, and the kingdom of the Krus. Kama replied, When thou hast said it, I regard it as already accomplished. I only long for thy friendship. And, O Lord, my wish is even for a single combat with Arjuna. Dridana said, Do thou with me enjoy the good things of life. Be thou the benefactor of thy friend, and, O repressor of enemies, place thou thy feet on the heads of all foes. VYASA continued, Arjuna, after this, deeming himself disgraced, said unto Karna stationed amidst the brothers like unto a cliff, the path which the unwelcome intruder and the uninvited talker cometh to, shall be thine, O Karna, for thou shalt be slain by me. Karna replied, This arena is meant for all, not for thee alone, O Falgna. They are kings who are superior in energy, and really the Kshatriya regardeth might and might alone. What need of altercation, which is the exercise of the weak? ODHARATA, speak then in arrows until with arrows I strike off thy head today before the preceptor himself. Vayapayana continued, hastily embraced by his brothers, pair to that subduer of hostile cities, with the permission of Drona, advance for the combat. On the other side, Karna, having been embraced by Duryodhana with his brothers, taking up his bow and arrows, stood ready for the fight. Then the firmament became enveloped in clouds emitting flashes of lightning, and the colored bow of Indra appeared shedding its fulgent rays. And the clouds seemed to laugh on account of the rows of white cranes that were then on the wing. And seeing Indra thus viewing the arena from affection for his son, the sun too dispersed the clouds from over his own offspring. And Falguna remained deep hid under cover of the clouds, while Karna remained visible, being surrounded by the rays of the Sunday. And the son of Dhritarashtra stood by Karna, and Bharadwaja and Kripa and Bhishma remained with Partha. And the assembly was divided, as also the female spectators. And knowing the state of things, Kunti the daughter of Bhoja swooned away. And by the help of female attendants, Vidura, versed in the lore of all duties, revived the insensible Kunti by sprinkling sandal paste and water on her person. On being restored to consciousness, Kunti, seeing her two sons clad in mail, was seized with fear, but she could do nothing to protect them. And beholding both the warriors with bows strung in their hands, the son of Saradwat, namely, Kripa, knowing all duties and cognizant at the rules regulating duels, addressed Karna, saying, "This Pandava, who is the youngest son of Kunti, belongs to the Kauruva race. He will engage in combat with thee. But, O mighty armed one, thou too must tell us thy lineage and the names of thy father and mother and the royal line of which thou art the ornament." Learning all this, Partha will fight with thee or not, as he will think fit. Sons of kings never fight with men of inglorious lineage. Vayapayana continued, when he was thus addressed by Kripa, Karna's countenance became like unto a lotus pale and torn with the pelting showers in the rainy season. Duryodhana said, "O preceptor, really the scriptures have it that three classes of persons can lay claim to royalty, namely, persons have the blood royal, heroes, and lastly, those that lead armies. If Falguna is unwilling to fight with one who is not a king, I will install Karna as king of Venga." Vayapayana said, at that very moment, seated on a golden seat, with parched paddy and with flowers and water pots and much gold, the mighty warrior Karna was installed king by Brahman as versed in mantras. And the royal umbrella was held over his head, while yak tails waved around that redoubtable hero of graceful mien. And the cheers, having ceased, King Karna said unto the Kauruva Duryodhana, "O tiger among monarchs, what shall I give unto thee that may compare with thy gift of a kingdom? O king, I will do all thou biddest." And Sidana said unto him, "I eagerly wish for thy friendship." Thus spoken to, Karna replied, "Bid so." And they embraced each other in joy, and experienced great happiness. Section 139. Vayapayana said, after this, with his sheet loosely hanging down, Adhirartha entered the lists, perspiring and trembling, and supporting himself on a staff. Seeing him, Karna left his bow and impelled by filial regard bowed down his head still wet with the water of inauguration. And the charioteer, hurriedly covering his feet with the end of his sheet, addressed Karna crowned with success as his son. And the charioteer embraced Karna and from excess of affection bedewed his head with tears, that head still wet with the water sprinkled over it on account of the coronation as king of Venga. Seeing the charioteer, the Pandava Bhishma took Karna for a charioteer's son, and said by way of ridicule, "O son of a charioteer, thou dost not deserve death in fight at the hands of Partha. As befits thy race take thou in the whip. And, O worst of mortals, surely thou art not worthy to sway the kingdom of Venga, even as a dog doth not deserve the butter placed before the sacrificial fire." Karna, thus addressed, with slightly quivering lips fetched a deep sigh, looked at the god of the day in the skies. And even as a mad elephant riseth from an assemblage of lotuses, the mighty Duryodhana arose in wrath from among his brothers, and addressed thou performer of dreadful deeds, Bhimashana, present there, O Vrukadara, it behoveth thee not to speak such words. Why does the cardinal virtue of a Kshatriya, and even a Kshatriya of inferior birth, deserveth to be fought with? The lineage of heroes, like the sources of a lordly river, is ever unknown. The fire that covereth the whole world riseth from the waters. The thunder that slayeth the Danavas was made of a bone of a mortal named Dadichi. The illustrious deity Gaia, who combines in his composition the portions of all the other deities, is of a lineage unknown. Some call him the offspring of Agni, some of Kritika, some of Rudrata, and some of Ganga. It hath been heard by us that persons born in the Kshatriya order have become Brahmanas. Swamitra and others, born Kshatriyas, have obtained the eternal Brahma. The foremost of all wielders of weapons, the preceptor Drona, hath been born in a waterpot, and Kripa of the race of Gautama hath sprung from a clump of heath. Your own births, ye Pandava princes, are known to me. Can a Kshatriya bring forth a tiger, like Karna, of the splendor of the sun, and endued with every auspicious mark, and born also with a natural male and earrings? This prince among men deserveth the sovereignty of the world, not of Indra only, in consequence of the might of his arm and my swearing to obey him in everything. If there be anybody here to whom all that I have done unto Karna hath become intolerable, let him ascend his chariot and bend his bow with the help of his feet. Vayyampayana continued. Then there arose a confused murmur amongst the spectators approving of Duryodhana's speech. The sun, however, went down, but Prince Duryodhana, taking care in his hand, led him out of the arena, lighted with countless lamps. And, O king, the Pandavas also, accompanied by Drona and Kripa and Bhishma, returned to their abodes. And the people, too, came away, some naming Arjuna, some Karna, and some Duryodhana, as the victor of the day. And Kunti, recognizing her son in Karna by the various auspicious marks on his person, and beholding him installed in the sovereignty of Indra, was from motherly affection, very pleased. And Duryodhana, O monarch, having obtained Karna, in this way, banished his fears arising out of Arjuna's proficiency in arms. And the heroic Karna, accomplished in arms, began to gratify Duryodhana by sweet speeches, while Yudhishthira was impressed with the belief that there was no war on earth like unto Karna. Section 140. Vayyampayana continued, beholding the Pandavas and the son of Dhritarashtra accomplished in arms, Drona thought the time had come when he could demand the preceptorial fee. And, O king, assembling his pupils one day together, the preceptor Drona asked of them the fee, saying, Seize Drupada, the king of Panchala in battle, and bring him unto me. That shall be the most acceptable fee. Those warriors then answering, So be it, speedily mounted up on their chariots, and for bestowing upon their preceptor the fee he had demanded, marched out, accompanied by him. Those bulls among men, smiting the Panchalas on their way, laid siege to the capital of the great Drupada. And Duryodhana and Karna and the mighty Ujitsu, and Dusasana and Vikarna and Jalasandha and Sulakana, these and many other foremost of Kshatriya princes of great prowess, vied with one another in becoming the foremost in the attack. And the princes, riding in first-class chariots and following the cavalry, entered the hostile capital, and proceeded along the streets. Meanwhile, the king of Panchala, beholding that mighty force and hearing its loud clamor, came out of his palace, accompanied by his brothers. Though King Yajnasena was well armed, the cruel army assailed him with a shower of arrows, uttering their war cry. Yajnasena, however, not easy to be subdued in battle, approaching the Krus upon his white chariot, began to rain his fierce arrows around. Before the battle commenced, Arjuna, beholding the pride of prowess displayed by the princes, addressed his preceptor, the best of Brahmanas, Drona, and said, "We shall exert ourselves after these have displayed their prowess. The king of Panchala can never be taken on the field of the battle by any of these." Having said this, the son of Kunti, surrounded by his brothers, waited outside the town at a distance of a mile from it. Meanwhile Drupada, beholding the Kuru host, rushed forward and pouring a fierce shower of arrows around, terribly afflicted the Kuru ranks. And such was his lightness of motion on the field of battle that, though he was fighting unsupported on a single chariot, the Krus from panic supposed that there were many Drupadas opposed to them. And the fierce arrows of that monarch fell fast on all sides, till kenchs and trumpets and drums by thousands began to be sounded by the Panchalas from their houses, giving the alarm. Then there arose from the mighty Panchala host a roar terrible as that of the lion, while the twang of their bowstrings seemed to rend the very heavens. Then Duryodhana and Vikarna, Subahu and Tirgalakana and Dusasana, becoming furious, began to shower their arrows upon the enemy. But the mighty bowman, Prishapa's son, invincible in battle, though very much pierced with the arrows of the enemy, instantly began, Odbharata, to flip the hostile ranks with greater vigor. And carrying over the field of battle like a fiery wheel, King Drupada with his arrows smote Duryodhana and Vikarna and even the mighty Karna and many other heroic princes and numberless warriors, and sated their thirst for battle. Then all the citizens showered upon the Krus various missiles like clouds showering raindrops upon the earth. Young and old, they all rushed to battle, assailing the Krus with vigor. The Kauravas, then, Odbharata, beholding the battle become frightful, broke and fled wailing towards the Pandavas. The Pandavas, hearing the terrible wail of the beaten host, reverentially saluted Drona and ascended their chariots. Then Arjuna, hastily bidding Yudhishthira not to engage in the fight, rushed forward, appointing the sons Hamatri, Nakula and Sahadeva, the protectors of his chariot wheels, while Bhishmasena were fighting in the van, mace in hand, ran ahead. The senseless Arjuna, thus accompanied by his brothers, hearing the shouts of the enemy, advanced towards them, filling the whole region with the rattle of his chariot wheels. And like a Makara entering the sea, the mighty armed Bhishma, resembling a second Yama, mace in hand, entered the Panchala ranks, fiercely roaring like the ocean in a tempest. And Bhishma, mace in hand, first rushed towards the array of elephants in the hostile force, while Arjuna, proficient in battle, assailed the force with the prowess of his arms. And Bhishma, like the great destroyer himself, began to slay those elephants with his mace. Those huge animals, like unto mountains, struck with Bhishma's mace, had their heads broken into pieces. Covered with stream of blood, they began to fall upon the ground like cliffs loosened by thunder. And the Pandavas prostrated on the ground elephants and horses and cars by thousands and slew many foot soldiers and many car warriors. Indeed, as a herdsman in the woods driveth before him with a staff countless cattle with ease, so did Vrukadara drive before him the chariots and elephants of the hostile force. Meanwhile, Falguna, impelled by the desire of doing good unto Bharatas' son, assailed the son of Prashata with a shower of arrows and felled him from the elephant on which he was seated. And, O monarch, Arjuna, like unto the terrible fire that consumeth all things at the end of the Eva, began to prostrate on the ground horses and cars and elephants by thousands. The Panchalas and the Sringas, on the other hand, thus assailed by the Pandava, met him with a perfect shower of weapons of various kinds. And they sent up a loud shout and fought desperately with Arjuna. The battle became furious and terrible to behold. Hearing the enemy's shouts, the son of Indra was filled with wrath, and assailing the hostile host with a thick shower of arrows, rushed towards it furiously, afflicting it with renewed vigor. They who observed the illustrious Arjuna at that time could not mark any interval between his fixing the arrows on the bestring and letting them off. Loud were the shouts that rose there, mingled with cheers of approval. Then the king of the Panchalars, accompanied by the generalissimo of his forces, Satyajit, rushed with speed at Arjuna like the Ajala Sambhava rushing at the chief of the Celestials, in days of yore. Then Arjuna covered the king of Panchala with a shower of arrows. Then there arose a frightful uproar among the Panchala host like unto the roar of a mighty lion springing at the leader of a herd of elephants. And beholding Arjuna rushing at the king of Panchala to seize him, Satyajit of great prowess rushed at him. And the two warriors, like unto Indra and the Ajala Virakana's son, Vali, approaching each other for combat, began to grind each other's ranks. Then Arjuna with great force pierced Satyajit with 10 keen shafts, at which feat the spectators were all amazed. But Satyajit, without losing any time, assailed Arjuna with 100 shafts. Then that mighty car warrior, Arjuna, endued with remarkable lightness of motion, thus covered by the shower of arrows, rubbed his bestring to increase the force and velocity of his shafts. Then cutting in twain his antagonist's bow, Arjuna rushed at the king of the Panchalars, but Satyajit, quickly taking out a tougher bow, pierced with his arrows Partha, his chariot, charioteer, and horses. Arjuna, thus assailed in battle by the Panchala warrior, forgave not his foe. Eager to slay him at once, he pierced with a number of arrows his antagonist's horses, flanks, bow, clenched, left, fist, charioteer, and the attendant at his back. Then Satyajit, finding his bows repeatedly cut in twain and his horses slain, desisted from the fight. The king of the Panchalars, beholding his general thus discomfited in the encounter, himself began to shower his arrows upon the pend of a prince. Then Arjuna, that foremost of warriors, crowned with success, began to fight furiously, and quickly cutting his enemy's bow in twain as also his flagstaff, which he caused to fall down, pierced his antagonist's horses, and chariot also with 5 arrows. Then throwing aside his bow, Arjuna took his quiver, and taking out the scimitar and sending forth a loud shout, leapt from his own chariot upon that of his foe. And standing there with perfect fearlessness he seized Drupada as Garuda seized the huge snake after agitating the waters of the ocean. At the sight of this, the Panchala troops ran away in all directions. Then Dhananjaya, having thus exhibited the might of his arm in the presence of both hosts, sent forth a loud shout and came out of the Panchala ranks. And beholding him returning, with his captive, the princes began to lay waste Drupada's capital. Addressing them, Arjuna said, "This best of monarchs, Drupada, is a relative of the Kuru heroes. Therefore, O Bhima, slay not his soldiers. Let us only give unto our preceptor his fee." Vyampayana continued, "O king, thus prevented by Arjuna, the mighty Bhima, the unsatiated with the exercise have battle, refrain from the act of slaughter. And, O bull of the Bharata race, the princes then, taking Drupada with them after having seized him on the field of battle along with his friends and counselors, offered him unto Drona. And Drona, beholding Drupada thus brought under complete control, humiliated and deprived of wealth, remembered that monarch's former hostility, and addressing him said, "My kingdom and capital have been laid waste by me. But fear not for thy life, though it dependeth now on the will of thy foe. Dost thou now desire to revive thy friendship with me?" Having said this, he smiled a little and again said, "Fear not for thy life, brave king. We, Brahmanas, are ever forgiving. And, O bull among Kshatriyas, my affection and love for thee have grown with me in consequence of our having sported together in childhood in the hermitage. Therefore, O king, I ask for thy friendship again. And as a boon, unasked, I give thee half the kingdom that was thine. Thou toldst me before that none who was not a king could be a king's friend. Therefore is it, O Yajnasena, that I retain half thy kingdom. Thou art the king of all the territory lying on the southern side of the Bhagirathi, while I become king of all the territory on the north of that river. And, O Panchala, if it pleased thee, know me hence for thy friend. On hearing these words, Drupada answered, Thou art of noble soul and great prowess. Therefore, O Brahmana, I am not surprised at what thou doest. I am very much gratified with thee, and I desire thy eternal friendship. Vayyampayana continued, After this, O Bharata, Drona released the king of Panchala, and cheerfully performing the usual offices of regard, bestowed upon him half the kingdom. Thenceforth Drupada began to reside sorrowfully in the city of Kampiya within the province of Mekandi on the banks of the Ganga, filled with many towns and cities. And after his defeat by Drona, Drupada also ruled the southern Panchalas up to the bank of the Sharmanwati river. And Drupada from that day was well convinced that he could not, by Kshatri might alone, defeat Drona, being very much his inferior in Brahma, spiritual, power. And he, therefore, began to wander over the whole earth to find out the means of obtaining a son, who would subjugate his Brahmana foe. Meanwhile Drona continued to reside in Ahikatra. Thus, O king, was the territory of Ahikatra full of towns and cities, obtained by Arjuna, and bestowed upon Drona. Section 141. Vayyampayana continued, After the expiration, O king, of a year from this, Dhritarashtra, moved by kindness for the people, installed Yudhishthira, the son of Pandu, as the heir apparent of the kingdom on account of his firmness, fortitude, patience, benevolence, frankness and unswerving honesty of heart. And within a short time Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, by his good behavior, manners and close application to business, overshadowed the deeds of his father. And the second Pandava, Vrkadara, began to receive continued lessons from Sankarsana, Valarama, in encounters with the sword and the mace and on the chariot. And after Bhma's education was finished, he became in strength like unto the Amatsena himself, and continuing to live in harmony with his brothers, he began to exert his prowess. And Arjuna became celebrated for the firmness of his grasp of weapons, for his lightness of motion, precision of aim, and his proficiency in the use of the Ksatra, Naraka, Vala and Vipatha weapons, indeed, of all weapons, whether straight or crooked and heavy. And Drona certified that there was none in the world who was equal to Arjuna in lightness of hand and general proficiency. One day, Drona, addressing Arjuna before the assembled Kurva princes, said, There was a disciple of Agastya in the science of arms called Agnivasa. He was my preceptor and I, his disciple. By ascetic merit I obtained from him a weapon called Brahmasura, which could never be futile and which was like unto thunder itself, capable of consuming the whole earth. That weapon, O Bharata, from what I have done, may now pass from disciple to disciple. While imparting it to me, my preceptor said, O son of Bharata, never shalt thou hurl this weapon at any human being, especially at one who is of poor energy. Thou hast, O hero, obtained that celestial weapon. None else deserveth it. But obey the command of the Rishi, Agnivasa. And, look here, Arjuna, give me now the preceptorial fee in the presence of these thy cousins and relatives. When Arjuna, on hearing this, pledged his word that he would give what the preceptor demanded, the latter said, O sinless one, thou must fight with me when I fight with thee. And that bull among the Kuru princes thereupon pledged his word unto Drona, and touching his feet, went away northward. Then there arose a loud shout covering the whole earth, bounded by her belt of seas, to the effect that there was no bowman in the whole world like unto Arjuna. And, indeed, Dhananjaya, in encounters with the mace and the sword and on the chariot as also with the bow, acquired wonderful proficiency. Sahadeva obtained the whole science of morality and duties from Brihaspati, the spiritual chief of celestials, and continued to live under the control of his brothers. And Nakula, the favorite of his brothers taught by Drona, became known as a skillful warrior and a great car warrior, Etarekta. Indeed, Arjuna and the other Pandava princes became so powerful that they slew in battle the great Suvira, who had performed a sacrifice extending over 3 years, undaunted by the raids of the Gandharvas. And the king of the Yavanas himself, whom the powerful Pandu even had failed to bring under subjection, was brought by Arjuna under control. Then again Vipula, the king of the Suviras, endued with great prowess, who had always shown a disregard for the Krus, was made by the intelligent Arjuna to feel the edge of his power. And Arjuna also repressed by means of his arrows, the Pranava, King Sumitra of Suvira, also known by the name of Datamitra, who had resolutely sought an encounter with him. The third of the Pandava princes, assisted by Bhima, on only a single car subjugated all the kings of the east backed by 10,000 cars. In the same way, having conquered on a single car the whole of the south, Dhananjaya sent unto the kingdom of the Krus a large booty. Thus to those foremost of men, the illustrious Pandavas, conquering the territories of other kings, extend the limits of their own kingdom. But beholding the great prowess and strength of those mighty bowmen, King Dhritarashtra's sentiments towards the Pandavas became suddenly poisoned, and from that day the monarch became so anxious that he could hardly sleep. Section 142. Vyayampayana continued, on hearing that the heroic sons have Pandu endued with excess of energy had become so mighty, King Dhritarashtra became very miserable with anxiety. Then summoning unto his side Kanaka, that foremost minister, well versed in the science of politics and an expert in counsels, the king said, O best of Brahmanas, the Pandavas are daily overshadowing the earth. I am exceedingly jealous of them. Should I have peace or war with them? O Kanaka, advise me truly, for I shall do as thou bidst. Vyayampayana continued, the best of Brahmanas, thus addressed by the king, freely answered him in these pointed words, well agreeing with the import of political science. Listen to me, O sinless king, as I answer thee. And, O best of Kuru kings, it behoveth thee not to be angry with me after hearing all I say. Kings should ever be ready with uplifted messes, to strike when necessary, and they should ever increase their prowess. Carefully avoiding all faults themselves, they should ceaselessly watch over the faults of their foes and take advantage of them. If the king is always ready to strike, everybody feareth him. Therefore the king should ever have recourse to chastisement in all he doth. He should so conduct himself that his foe may not detect any weak side in him. But by means of the weakness he detecteth in his foe he should pursue him to destruction. He should always conceal, like the tortoise concealing its body, his means and ends, and he should always keep back his own weakness from the sight of others. And having begun a particular act, he should ever accomplish it thoroughly. Behold, a thorn, if not extracted wholly, produce a festering sore. The slaughter of a foe who doth the evil is always praiseworthy. If the foe be one of great prowess, one should always watch for the hour of his disaster and then kill him without any scruples. If he should happen to be a great warrior, his hour of disaster also should be watched, and he should then be induced to fly. O sire, an enemy should never be scorned, however contemptible. A spark of fire is capable of consuming an extensive forest if only it can spread from one object to another in proximity. Kings should sometimes feign blindness and deafness, for if impotent to chastise, they should pretend not to notice the faults that called for chastisement. On occasions, such as these, let them regard their bows as made of straw. But they should be always on the alert like a herd of deer sleeping in the woods. When thy foe is in thy power, destroy him by every means open or secret. Do not show him any mercy, although he seek thy protection. A foe, or one that hath once injured thee, should be destroyed by lavishing money, if necessary, for by killing him thou mayst be at ease. The dead can never inspire fear. Thou must destroy the 3, 5 and 7 resources of thy foes. Thou must destroy thy foe's root and branch. Then shalt thou destroy their allies and partisans. The allies and partisans can never exist if the principle be destroyed. If the root of the tree is torn up, the branches and twigs can never exist as before. Carefully concealing thy own means and ends, thou shalt always watch thy foes, always seeking their flaws. Thou shalt, O king, rule thy kingdom, always anxiously watching thy foes. By maintaining the perpetual fire by sacrifices, by brown cloths, by metlocks, and by hides of animals for thy bedding, shalt thou at first gain the confidence of thy foes, and when thou hast gained it thou shalt then spring upon them like a wolf. For it hath been said that in the acquisition of wealth even the garb of holiness might be employed as a hooked staff to bend down a branch in order to pluck the fruits that are ripe. The method followed in the plucking of fruits should be the method in destroying foes, for thou shalt proceed on the principle of selection. Bear thy foe upon thy shoulders till the time cometh when thou canst throw him down, breaking him into pieces like an earthen pot thrown down with violence upon a stony surface. The foe must never be let off even though he addresseth thee most piteously. No pity shalt thou show him but slay him at once. By the arts of conciliation or the expenditure of money should the foe be slain. By creating disunion amongst his allies, or by the employment of force, indeed by every means in thy power shalt thou destroy thy foe. Thritarashtre said, Tell me truly how a foe can be destroyed by the arts of conciliation or the expenditure of money, or by producing disunion or by the employment of force. Kanaka replied, Listen, O monarch, to the history of a jackal dwelling in days of yore in the forest and fully acquainted with the science of politics. There was a wise jackal, mindful of his own interests, who lived in the company of 4 friends, namely, a tiger, a mouse, a wolf, and a mongoose. One day they saw in the woods a strong deer, the leader of a herd, whom, however, they could not seize for his fleetness and strength. They thereupon called a council for consultation. The jackal, opening the proceedings, said, O tiger, thou hast made many an effort to seize this deer, but all in vain, simply because this deer is young, fleet and very intelligent. Let now the mouse go and eat into its feet when it lieth asleep. And when this is done, let the tiger approaching seize it. Then shall we all, with great pleasure, feast on it. Hearing these words of the jackal, they all set to work very cautiously as he directed. And the mouse ate into the feet of the deer, and the tiger killed it as anticipated. And beholding the body of the deer lying motionless on the ground, the jackal said unto his companions, Blessed be ye. Go and perform your ablutions. In the meantime I will look after the deer. Hearing what the jackal said, they all went into a stream. And the jackal waited there, deeply meditating upon what he should do. The tiger, endued with great strength, returned first of all to the spot after having performed his ablutions. And they saw the jackal there plunged in meditation. The tiger said, Why art thou so sorrowful, O wise one? Thou art the foremost of all intelligent beings. Let us enjoy ourselves today by feasting on this carcass. The jackal said, Hear, O mighty armed one, what the mouse hath said. He hath even said, O, fie on the strength of the king of the beasts. This deer hath been slain by me. By might of my arm he will today gratify his hunger. When he hath boasted in such a language, I, from my part, do not wish to touch this food. The tiger replied, if, indeed, the mouse hath said so, my sense is now awakened. I shall, from this day, slay with the might of my own arms, creatures ranging the forest and then feast on their flesh. Having said this, the tiger went away. And after the tiger had left the spot, the Messie came. And seeing the mouse come, the jackal addressed him and said, Blessed be thou, O mouse, but listen to what the mongoose hath said. He hath even said, the carcass of this deer's poison, the tiger having touched it with his claws. I will not eat of it. On the other hand, if thou, O jackal, permittest it, I will even slay the mouse and feast on him. Hearing this, the mouse became alarmed and quickly entered his hole. And after the mouse had gone, the wolf, O king, came there having performed his ablutions. And seeing the wolf come, the jackal said unto him, the king of the beasts hath been angry with thee. Evil is certain to overtake thee. He is expected here with his wife. Do as thou pleasest. Thus was the wolf also, fond of animal flesh, God-readed by the jackal. And the wolf fled, contracting his body into the smallest dimensions. It was then that the mongoose came. And, O king, the jackal, seeing him come, said, By the might of my arm have I defeated the others who have already fled. Fight with me first, and then eat of this flesh as you please. The mongoose replied, When, indeed, the tiger, the wolf, and the intelligent mouse have all been defeated by thee, heroes as they are, thou seemst to be a greater hero still. I do not desire to fight with thee. Saying this, the mongoose also went away. Kanaka continued, when they all had thus left the place, the jackal, well pleased with the success of his policy, alone ate up that flesh. If kings always act in this way, they can be happy. Thus should the timid by exciting their fears, the courageous by the arts of conciliation, the covetous by gift of wealth, and equals and inferiors by exhibition of prowess be brought under thy sway. Besides all this, O king, that I have said, listen now to something else that I say. Kanaka continued, if thy son, friend, brother, father, or even the spiritual preceptor, anyone becometh thy foe, thou shalt, if desirous of prosperity, slay him without scruples. By curses and incantations, by gift of wealth, by poison, or by deception, the foe should be slain. He should never be neglected from disdain. If both the parties be equal and success uncertain, then he that acteth with diligence groweth in prosperity. If the spiritual preceptor himself be vain, ignorant of what should be done and what left undone, and vicious in his ways, even he should be chastised. If thou art angry, show thyself as if thou art not so, speaking even then with a smile on thy lips. Never reprove anyone with indications of anger, in thy speech. And Obharata, speak soft words before thou smittest and even while thou art smiting. After the smiting is over, pity the victim, and grieve for him, and even shed tears. Comforting thy foe by conciliation, by gift of wealth, and smooth behavior, thou must smite him when he walketh not errant. Thou shalt equally smile the heinous offender who liveth by the practice of virtue, for the garb of virtue simply covereth his offences like black clouds covering the mountains. Thou shalt burn the house of that person whom thou punishest with death. And thou shalt never permit beggars and atheists and thieves to dwell in thy kingdom. By a sudden sally or pitched battle, by poison or by corrupting his allies, by gift of wealth, by any means in thy power, thou shalt destroy thy foe. Thou mayst act with the greatest cruelty. Thou shalt make thy teeth sharp to give a fatal bite. And thou shouldst ever smite so effectually that thy foe may not again raise his head. Thou shalt ever stand in fear of even one from whom there is no fear, not to speak of him from whom there is such. For if the first be ever powerful, he may destroy thee to the root, for thy unpreparedness. Thou shalt never trust the faithless, nor trust too much those that are faithful, for if those in whom thou confidest prove thy foes, thou art certain to be annihilated. After testing their faithfulness thou shalt employ spies in thy own kingdom and in the kingdoms of others. Thy spies in foreign kingdoms should be act deceivers and persons in the garb of ascetics. Thy spies should be placed in gardens, places of amusement, temples and other holy places, drinking halls, streets, and with thee. 18. Tier thus, namely, the minister, the chief priest, the heir presumptive, the commander-in-chief, the gatekeepers of the court, persons in the inner apartments, the jailer, the chief surveyor, the head of the treasury, the general executant of altars, the chief of the town police, the chief architect, the chief justice, the president of the council, the chief of the punitive department, the commander of the fort, the chief of the arsenal, the chief of the frontier guards, and the keeper of the forests, and in places of sacrifice, near wells, on mountains and in rivers, in forests, and in all places where people congregate. In speech thou shalt ever be humble, but let thy heart be ever sharp as razor. And when thou art engaged in doing even a very cruel and terrible act, thou shalt talk with smiles on thy lips. If desirous of prosperity, thou shalt adopt all arts, humility, oath, conciliation, worshipping the feet of others by lowering thy head, inspiring hope, and the like. And a person conversing with the rules of policy is like a tree decked with flowers but bearing no fruit. Or, if bearing fruit, these must be at a great height not easily attainable from the ground. And if any of these fruits seem to be right, care must be taken to make it appear raw. Conducting himself in such a way, he shall never fade. Virtue, wealth and pleasure have both their evil and good effects closely knit together. While extracting the effects that are good, those that are evil should be avoided. Those that practice virtue incessantly are made unhappy for want of wealth and the neglect of pleasure. Those again in pursuit of wealth are made unhappy for the neglect of two others. And so those who pursue pleasure suffer for the inattention to virtue and wealth. Therefore, thou shalt pursue virtue, wealth and pleasure, in such a way that thou mayst not have to suffer therefrom. With humiliation and attention, without jealousy and solicitous of accomplishing thy purpose, shalt thou, in all sincerity, consult with the Brahmanas. When thou art fallen, thou shalt raise thyself by any means, gentle or violent, and after thou hast thus raised thyself thou shalt practice virtue. He that hath never been afflicted with calamity can never have prosperity. This may be seen in the life of one who surviveth his calamities. He that is afflicted with sorrow should be consoled by the recitation of the historied persons of former times, like those of Nala and Rama. He whose heart hath been unstrung by sorrow should be consoled with hopes of future prosperity. He again who is learned and wise should be consoled by pleasing offices presently rendered unto him. He who, having concluded a treaty with an enemy, reposeth at ease as if he hath nothing more to do, is very like a person who awaketh, fallen down from the top of a tree wherein he had slept. A king should ever keep to himself his counsels without fear of calumny, and while beholding everything with the eyes of his spies, he should take care to conceal his own emotions before the spies of his enemies. Like a fisherman who becometh prosperous by catching and killing fish, a king can never grow prosperous without tearing the victuals of his enemy and without doing some violent deeds. The might of thy foe, as represented by his armed force, should ever be completely destroyed, by plowing it up, like weeds, and mowing it down and otherwise afflicting it by disease, starvation, and want of drink. A person in want never approacheth, from love, one in affluence. And when one's purpose hath been accomplished, one hath no need to approach him whom he had hitherto looked to for its accomplishment. Therefore, when thou dost anything, never do it completely, but ever leave something to be desired for by others, whose services thou mayst need. One who is desirous of prosperity should with diligence seek allies and means, and carefully conduct his wars. His exertions in these respects should always be guided by prudence. A prudent king should ever act in such a way that friends and foes may never know his motive before the commencement of his acts. Let them know all when the act hath been commenced, and as long as danger doth not come, so long only shalt thou act as if thou art afraid. But when it hath overtaken thee, thou must grapple with it courageously. He who trusteth in a foe who hath been brought under subjection by force, summoneth his own death as a crab by her act of conception. Thou shalt always reckon the future act as already arrived, and concert measures for meeting it, else, from want of calmness caused by haste, thou mayst overlook an important point in meeting it when it is before thee. A person desirous of prosperity should always exert with prudence, adopting his measures to time and place. He should also act with an eye to destiny as capable of being regulated by mantras and sacrificial rites, and to virtue, wealth, and pleasure. It is well known that time and place, if taken into consideration, always produce the greatest good. If the foe is insignificant, he should not yet be despised, for he may soon grow like a palmyra tree extending its roots, or like a spark of fire in the deep woods it may soon burst into an extensive conflagration. As a little fire gradually fed with faggots soon becometh capable of consuming even the biggest blocks, so the person who increased this power by making alliances and friendships soon becometh capable of subjugating even the most formidable foe. The hope thou givest unto thy foe should be long deferred before it is fulfilled, and when the time cometh for its fulfillment, invent some pretext for deferring it still. Let that pretext be shown as founded upon some reason, and let that reason itself be made to appear as founded on some other reason. Kings should, in the matter of destroying their foes, ever resemble razors in every particular, and pitying as these are sharp, hiding their intents as these are concealed in their leathern cases, striking when the opportunity cometh as these are used on proper occasions, sweeping off their foes with all their allies and dependents as these shave the head or the chin without leaving a single hair. O supporter of the dignity of the Krus, bearing thyself towards the Pandavas and others also as policy dictateth, act in such a way that thou mayst not have to grieve in future. Well do I know that thou art endued with every blessing, and possessed of every mark of good fortune. Therefore, O king, protect thyself from the sons Hapandu. O king, the sons Hapandu are stronger than their cousins, thy sons. Therefore, O chastiser of foes, I tell thee plainly what thou shalt do. Listen to it, O king, with thy children, and having listened to it, exert yourselves to do the needful. O king, act in such a way that there may not be any fear for thee from the Pandavas. Indeed, adopt such measures consonant with the science of policy that thou mayst not have to grieve in the future. Vyampayana continued, having delivered himself thus Kanaka returned to his abode, while the Kuru king Dhritarashtra became pensive and melancholy. The Mahabharata of KRISHNA-DWAIPAYANA VYASA. Translated into English, prose from the original Sanskrit text by Kisari Mohan Ganguli, 1883–1896. Calcutta.